Okay, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about migrating Lotus Notes applications. So stay tuned. Okay, so before we talk about migrating and actually getting into an actual migration, I just wanted to talk about migrations, Lotus Notes application migrations to DOCOVA. And the reason why we do this is that, if you have DOCOVA, you're moving forward with low code. Like Gartner says, some 60% of medium and large size companies in the next couple of years will have a low code solution. And so as you move forward with your low code solution, Lotus Notes was a rapid application development environment. And you developed business applications on that platform. And for whatever reason, you decide to leave that platform. DOCOVA is the ideal platform to move to. And we help you, or the reason why DOCOVA is a great platform to move to is because we help you leverage your investment, the investment you made in Lotus Notes and Domino. And how? Number one, whatever time was spent developing those applications, right? So we automate the migration of those applications over to DOCOVA. And we're going to get into how much we automate it, which is more, in terms of our own platform, the most comprehensive migration, I think, on the planet. Okay, so your development that you've put into your applications, your development skills. So what IT knows about development in Lotus Notes. So if you know developments in Lotus Notes, you should be able to catch on quite easily in our browser-based environment in DOCOVA. And your user skills. So, the way that your users use Lotus Notes, you can bring that forward into the applications that you migrated over to DOCOVA, and we'll talk about that in one second too. Okay, so on our website, I'm just going to jump over to this page on our website. This talks about Lotus Notes application, our application migrator, and talks about how we can migrate your complex Notes applications over to DOCOVA. And on the right-hand side, we talk about analyze, plan, migrate, and manage. And so that's about analyzing your current environment. How many databases do you have? Are they being used by your users? How many, might you delete? How many might you archive, keep, re-engineer maybe? And so when we're talking about deleting, maybe there's apps that you don't use anymore. Okay, fine. Archiving. We don't archive like other notes archiving solutions. They like dump everything out to XML, and then they have their own interface, which helps you read that information or navigate that information. We do what's read-only, so we create read-only applications, so there's no ability to edit the information, but we do bring it over. And what that allows you to do is any applications that you've developed in DOCOVA, plus any applications that you've migrated from Lotus Notes over to DOCOVA, plus your read-only, your archived applications, will all be searchable and all be available. So you can also create a brand new application in DOCOVA and leverage some of the information that you have in a read-only application or an archived application that you brought over from Lotus Notes. So in our world, archive isn't just sort of dump it in the corner and maybe one day somebody will need to read it. In our world, it's readily available, readily searchable within the context of your live applications that you're using in your low-code environment. And then there's keeping applications. So in keeping apps, there's two things. One is those are ones we migrate. And in here you can see we migrate the user interface. So that's the navigation, the layout, the forms, the views, all that kind of stuff. The business logic, so that's all your formula language, that comes over. All your Lotus script, the Lotus script that's in your agents, behind buttons, what have you, that all comes over as well. And we translate that into JavaScript, into our API. And security, so all your reader names, your author, all that kind of security, and the ACLs that you have on your databases or in your applications get translated into DOCOVA application security. the database schema. So all of the back-end relational stuff gets moved over. And there's nothing you have to touch there. As I always purport with DOCOVA, there's the whole relational backend, the tables and the relationships. There's nothing that you have to touch there. DOCOVA handles that whole thing as a platform. And your data. Now, you can bring data or not, but you also can dump out your data and bring it over into the new application in DOCOVA. Now, in terms of user interface, they're same and not the same. And Gary's going to demonstrate a little bit of that. So what we do is we migrate the Notes application over, and it looks very much like the Notes application as it stood in DOCOVA, with typically menu on the left-hand side and the views, right? We have a lot more capability with our views, but we at least encompass what was a view in Lotus Notes. And it's interesting because sometimes we run into companies that want it to look exactly the same as the Lotus Notes. I don't know why exactly, but they want it to look very much the same as the Notes application. And then other companies that absolutely don't want it to look like that past Lotus Notes application at all. And we facilitate both. So first we migrate it over, and Gary will show you how easy it is then to modernize it, to make it look a little bit better really quickly, or a lot better. And you'll see opportunities for making it look better as we go through our other videos. And then there's another option of re-engineering. It is so easy to put together an application in DOCOVA that sometimes you might just want to re-engineer the application and create it. You just build it. You can see in DOCOVA we have so many design elements that lend themselves to encompassing what is in a Lotus Notes application that it's very easy to re-engineer. Sometimes in Notes applications you have old forms, old views that you don't use anymore, and you don't want to bring them over as part of the migration or anything like that. And so sometimes it's just easier to just go ahead and start fresh and create an application. And you may be able to redevelop or re-engineer an application within a day or days. Something that would have taken quite a long time before. So we have those options available to you. Looking at my notes over here, this logic. Plus, of course, DOCOVA runs in our own cloud, our DOCOVA cloud. So in our cloud, you would get some sort of acronym. So for us, it is like dli.docova.net, for example. If your company was ABC or acme.inc, you might get acme.docova.net, for example, to run your DOCOVA environment. But you can run it on AWS, Azure. In fact, every time I log in for these videos and go through demos and stuff, I'm logging in through our Azure Active Directory and those credentials. You can use your own AD credentials. You can run on your own hosted environment or your own on-premises environment. So it doesn't matter wherever you want to run it. The other thing that's important is to talk about there in terms of Azure Active Directory and Active Directory and your Domino directory, even as you migrate away from Domino, is that you can run multi-people. You don't have to do these, especially if you're doing a bigger migration, you don't have to migrate all 350 people or 2,000 people or whatever it is. You can do chunks. And so DOCOVA will allow you to have people authenticated at different places. So you might be moving HR and their apps first, and maybe you're going on to Azure, for example, and they're using Outlook and you're using Azure Active Directory. And so as they get into that environment and you move their applications, migrate them over to DOCOVA, that group can be moved into DOCOVA, but they're still sharing a directory with everybody else. That's still the Domino directory. You can still have them authenticate on Domino, and as you move them to Azure, then move them to authenticate via Azure, that sort of thing, which is a very powerful way to facilitate, moving chunks of people as you perform your migration. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say for now. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Gary Walsh, who's going to do a migration demo for you and show you how you can easily get your application over and then modernize it. Okay, take it away, Gary.
Okay, thanks very much, John. My name's Gary Walsh. I'm going to walk you through the process of how we move the design and data of an application from the Notes Domino platform to DOCOVA running on the SQL platform. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go over to my Notes client, open up my Notes client, and I'll open up the actual application. And this is what it looks like in the Notes client. It has navigation along the left side, expandable, collapsible kind of menu items. This is a CRM application, so it's customer data. So you've got account information, and within the account record, you can roll up contact, lead, and opportunities. And then there's some reporting, other menu items in here. But a pretty typical traditional Notes type application. If we open up this one record here, this account record, you can see that the contact information and the opportunities is actually rolled up under that account record. So there's kind of a parent-child relationship. And if you're familiar with Notes and Domino, these are what we call embedded views. So there's separate forms for contacts, separate forms for opportunities, and we've got a way of displaying them within the parent account record. If I go into edit mode here, other things that are common to Notes is the ability to populate drop-down lists. Typically that's done from some kind of a profile. So depending on what you select on the form is what information shows. It's this progressive disclosure. All things that are pretty common to Notes and Domino. Okay, so I'll close out of here. I'll show you the same application in DOCOVA. So I'll flip over to the browser. I happen to be running out of Chrome. I could be using Firefox. And if we take a look at the migrated application, you can see it's the same type of thing. If I go into contacts, you've got that progressive disclosure where you can open and close these menu sections. If we open up this A Corp, you can see the design of the form is very similar to what you saw in the Notes. You can go in and you can open up, for example, out of the account record, you can open up contacts. And it's the same type of thing. The contact record actually shows within an embedded view. So it's a like-for-like type migration. The advantage of this is when the users start working out of a browser, it's going to look very much like the Notes client. You won't have a lot of change management to deal with. On the other side, some Notes applications were built decades ago, and cosmetically, they're not very attractive and not very efficient. Keep in mind that although we can do a like-for-like migration, you can dress up the application and modernize it once it gets into the DOCOVA platform. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But right now I'm going to show you the process. So we'll close this down. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new application. Okay, I'll give it a name, and we'll just call it CRM June 28th. You can use that for the description as well. Okay, I can pick a color for the application. I can pick some kind of an icon. We'll just pick an icon random and change the color over. For example, we'll pick something more in the cyan, green type side of things. Okay, so we're going to create the application. Application's now been created, but if we try to open it up and look at it, there's no design elements in it. And what I'll do is I'll close this down. We'll now go into the application, but we'll go in using App Builder. App Builder is our low-code development tool. This allows you to build applications very, very quickly. And some of the design elements are similar to what you would see in Notes and Domino, which really enables this whole migration capability. Now, as I mentioned, there's nothing in here. If we click on forms, there's no forms, there's no views. It's simply an open container. So what I'll do is I'll go into properties at this point. I'll go down here to migrations. And you can see it's a two-step process. You import the application and then you import the data. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the application. So I click here, import application. And all I have to do is I have to give it to the path to where the application is. Okay, so I'll give it the path and I'll click on import. Okay, what we have is we have a tool here. It's called App Importer. And what it's doing is it's going through that Notes and Domino application. And it's taken and it's migrating the design elements over. Now, things like GIFs and JPEG files will come over directly. But things like a Notes form is actually going to be converted into an HTML form. The Notes views will be converted into a similar construct within DOCOVA, but it all runs in a non-Domino type environment. Code that's in Lotus script is actually going to be changed over to JavaScript. Any backend agent code on the Domino side will actually be brought over as PHP and run as a PHP type agent. Okay. Now, this will take a few minutes. I'm just going to kind of pause the video and let it run through, and then we'll pick it up again. Okay, so there we're done. All of the design elements have all been migrated across. I'm just going to close out of here. And if we take and take a look at the forms, for example, whereas they were blank before, now you can see there's been about a dozen or so forms that have been pulled over. Click on views, you can see the views have been pulled over as well. If I click on, for example, JavaScript here, what's happened is all of the script libraries that were Lotus script libraries have now been converted into JavaScript libraries. So it's actually done the heavy lifting for you of converting a lot of that proprietary Lotus script code into something that'll run in the SQL environment. Now, a lot of code for processing in Notes and Domino is actually done with Lotus script and coded or hard coded. And it's very hard to visualize what the workflow is. You almost have to be a developer to go in and actually pick it apart. There is a workflow engine with DOCOVA, and often it's a lot more efficient to take and redo the workflow with the visual workflow engines in DOCOVA versus actually trying to debug migrated JavaScript code. But just keep in mind that this is sort of what I meant by modernizing the application. There's a lot of things within DOCOVA that simply weren't available in Notes and Domino. Now, if we go back to the workspace here and actually open up this application, so you can see all the navigation items have come across. Everything is here. If we were to take and create a new, for example, a new account record, the design of that record is very similar to what you saw in the Notes environment. You can go through and you can select values, but there's no data really in this application at this point. It's just the design elements. So what we have to do now is the second part of the migration. If I go back up here into properties again, go down to migrations, whereas we had imported the application as the first step, what we're going to do now is import the application data. Okay. So again, I've got the path to the original instance of DOCOVA. I'm going to select the application that we're importing. It's this CRM one here, and I'll click on import. And the process begins right now. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different things that happen. We import the data. We then index that data for the views. We import the security. So the security model that exists on the Notes and Domino with author reader fields and roles and that kind of thing. We actually have an API within DOCOVA that allows us to have that same security model in a SQL type environment, which is really unique. The heart and soul of Notes and Domino is really built around that whole security model, and the fact that we can replicate that model within the SQL environment is huge in terms of migration. Often migrating Notes and Domino applications to a different platform, the real challenge is bridging that security and bridging those unique things that Notes could do that typically other platforms don't do. Okay. So once again, this will take a few minutes. I'm just going to pause the video, and once it's done, we'll take a look at the migrated app. Okay, so here we go. The data's been migrated, the views have been indexed, the access control has been imported, and any doc links or any kind of linking that was in the original Notes application, that has also been migrated over, and that functionality exists now in the SQL environment. So if I close out of here now, we'll go back to the workspace, open up the application, and you can see now the data is actually showing. So the data has been migrated as well. If we open up this A Corp, take a look, for example, the contacts, you can see that the contact information is there as well. So all of the data has now been migrated. It's not perfect. There's still, you can see some cosmetics in here. You can see some IDs, columns that are showing an ID that should probably be hidden. It's not 100% in terms of the fidelity of the migrated application, but anyone who's worked in the development environment can appreciate exactly how much work the app importer has done for you and how far down the road it's gotten you. Literally within a few minutes, we've got the main core of the application migrated from one platform to another. Now, one of the things that's interesting about DOCOVA is if you're running in a Microsoft environment, for example, with Office 365, you don't have to expose this entire interface to your customers. Okay, there's a lot going on with DOCOVA, and it allows you to do a lot of things, but the user interface is specific to DOCOVA. If your users are used to a Microsoft Office 365 type environment, then these applications can actually be launched on their own with their own navigation. You don't have to launch them within the DOCOVA type environment. And what that allows you to do is kind of display them through Office 365. Okay, this is the interface that I work in every day. If I go up to the 9 dots here at the top, I've got some migrated applications, one being that CRM application, and it just appears as an icon off the Office 365. If I click on it, just like everything within Office 365, it'll open another tab and I'll have the CRM application running in that tab. Just keep in mind, you don't have to expose the entire DOCOVA interface to your end users initially, although you might want to do that down the road.